Hello, and welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did 11 years in prison, and I talk about prison stuff. In today's episode, I'm talking about unwritten rules and etiquette that kind of govern the interaction between prisoners and correctional officers. Somebody actually requested this video in the comments, so thank you for your question, and thank you for your suggestion. And that's what we're doing here today. That said, I could probably stretch this out a lot. There are a lot of things that I could talk about here, but I think for now I'm going to try to keep it pretty basic. If you guys are really interested in this subject, maybe I'll stretch it out to a part 2 or whatever. We'll see. But for now, like and subscribe if you want to, and we're going to talk about this. The first unwritten rule or point of etiquette between prisoners and guards, I would say, is respect. I've always been taught to treat others with respect, and I try to do that. I'm not always successful, but I try to treat other people with respect. Now, there are people that are of the mindset that respect is earned, it's not freely given. I don't really agree with that perspective. I'm not saying there's something wrong with it, but for me, that is not my mindset. I try to treat others with respect and courtesy until they do something to show me they're not worthy of my respect or courtesy or politeness. When it comes to corrections officers, guards, COs, whatever you want to call them, I find that it's very helpful to say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and maintain that courtesy with them. Even if they're kind of being difficult or something like that, sometimes being polite and respectful can be disarming. And that works the other way around. A lot of times when you have a prisoner who's having a bad day and he's acting out or he's being a dick for whatever reason, if an officer comes along and shows some respect and is courteous and polite, it can be very disarming. I think that helps build a rapport in addition to de-escalating situations. It helps build that rapport between staff and prisoners. So I think that is a very good thing. The second thing I want to talk about is familiarity. And this is actually a written rule in the prisoner's handbook. You're not supposed to be unduly familiar with officers. And, I would say that it is an unwritten rule because it kind of goes both ways. I don't know if it's a written rule for officers that they're not supposed to be unduly familiar with inmates. There's kind of a line there. Officers aren't necessarily your friends. And, if you're a corrections officer, a prisoner isn't your friend. You're there to do your job. And as a prisoner, that's important to remember. They are there to do a job. They're not necessarily there to make your life hell. They're not necessarily there to make your life miserable. Granted, there are some bad apples in every bunch. There are some people who work in corrections who should never work in corrections. They got the wrong mindset for it. But the same can be said for prisoners. There are some prisoners that are straight up assholes. They're hard to get along with, not just when it comes to guards or corrections officers, when it comes to other people in prison. There are people that I won't cell with because they're idiots. There are people that I don't want to work out with. I don't want to play cards with. Stuff like that. People that I met in prison that I just never would mess with because of the type of person they were. But that said, you can be polite and you can have that respectful interaction without being unduly familiar. You shouldn't ask an officer about their family. You shouldn't ask them about how their wife is doing, how their kids are doing. And the same is true in reverse. Officers really shouldn't be asking about a prisoner's family, their kids, their siblings, whatever. That's crossing a line that just isn't necessary. You're there to do a job. I'm there to do my time. We don't need that. That rapport is nice when you have a degree of professionalism. You don't need to be unduly familiar. The next thing I want to talk about when it comes to etiquette, don't make an officer do their job. You'll hear prisoners talk about certain officers that are cool. Like, oh, he's cool. I ain't worried about him. You know, so-and-so shaking down my cell, but I ain't worried about it. He's cool. There is some truth to that. There are some officers that just want to come in, put in their 8 hours and go home, and they're not trying to do anything extra. You know, they're not trying to write a DR and stuff like that. The other side of that, if an officer is cool or if I have a rapport with an officer, I'm not going to be smoking a cigarette when he's doing his rounds. I'm not going to put him in a compromising position. Sure, he doesn't want to write me up because we have a rapport or something. But on the other hand, if he doesn't write me up and somebody finds out that he caught me smoking and didn't say anything about it, that puts him in a bad spot. He can lose his job, he can lose his benefits, etc. That can potentially take food out of the mouths of his family, and I don't want that. So don't make an officer do their job. Because if they're doing rounds, wait till they're off the run before you light up a cigarette or go throw hands with someone or whatever you're going to do. If you're going to break the rules, don't do it right in front of the cops. Don't make them do their job because they don't want to do that. And this ties into the next thing that I kind of want to talk about. Don't expect an officer not to do their job. And what do I mean by that? It kind of goes back to that mentality where, oh, he's cool. He ain't going to mess with me. All right, well, here's the deal. If I know I have something in my cell that I'm not supposed to have, and I know I'm going to be shook down, I'm going to get that item out of my cell. I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to have someone else hold on to it, whatever. I'm not going to expect that officer to shake me down, find it, and not do their job. I expect them to do their job. That's the way it is. I'm never going to count on them not doing their job. That's just dumb. A lot of guys will do that. They will, do something really stupid, knowing that the officer can see what they're doing or knows what they're doing. They'll get caught. They'll get a write-up. And then they'll get mad about it. It's like, oh, man, I thought he was cool. He ended up writing me up. Now I'm on restriction. I got to go to the hole and all this other stuff. He's a corrections officer. It's his job to enforce the rules. How are you going to get mad at that? So don't expect them to not do their job. That's just stupid. The next thing I want to talk about regarding etiquette is don't expect a prisoner to do your job if you're a corrections officer. I'm not going to do certain things. Like if it's your job to do an inventory on the chemicals or whatever, I'm not doing that. You do that. If it's your job to make sure tools are in a certain place at the end of the workday, I'm not doing that for you. You're going to do that. When I was working maintenance, we used to install security cameras. Yeah, that was something that had to be done. But I would never do that because I'm a prisoner, a convict, offender, inmate, whatever you want to call it. There's that distaste for the word inmate, but that's a commonly used term, so there it is. But I am not installing security cameras. I am not security. I'm not an officer. It's not my job to police the other inmates or prisoners or whatever you want to call them. It ain't my job. I'm not installing security cameras. And I used to tell my bosses that. And they understood it, and they respected that. Don't ask me to install a security camera for you. No, that ain't happening. And what goes along with that, don't ask me to tell on people. I ain't telling you what's going on the yard at any given time. If there's something going down, you're just going to have to do your job and find out about it. I'm not going to tell you about it. So that's that. Don't ask me to tell on people. Don't ask me to do your job. None of that. We're not doing it. Another time I worked in the infirmary and, guys would go back there on crisis watch and they would smear feces and urine all over their walls and stuff sometimes. That wasn't my job to clean that up. That was the officer's job to clean that up. I'm not doing it. Y'all are getting paid good money for that. I'm not. And I'm not touching bodily waste. I'm not doing that. You don't know what people have. I'm not doing that. I'm not hazmat trained. No, that's your job, not mine. I ain't doing it. Don't ask me to. And I'm going to end this video. This is a short video. This is just some basic stuff. But I'm going to end this video with 4 things that you never mess with when it comes to prisons. Those are visits, phone calls, food, and mail. You don't mess with that. If my people are coming up to visit me, don't harass them. Don't mess with my family. If people are writing me letters, don't mess with my mail. Of course, it's in the rules where you get to read through it and see what's going on, but don't just hold my mail for no reason. Don't give my mail to somebody else so he can try to scam my family. Don't rip up my pictures. Don't rip up my letters. Don't throw away my mail. Don't touch my mail. Phone calls. Don't mess with those either. That goes back into the family relationships. Don't mess with my phone calls. If I'm on the phone and you need to talk to me, come by, let me know, say, hey, I need to talk to you, Mr. Swanson, and I will get off the phone. But if you come around when I'm talking on the phone to my family and you grab that receiver out of my hand and you hang it up, we're probably going to fight. I don't care if you are an officer, and there's going to be consequences for that. There's going to be negative consequences for that because you don't fight a prison guard and get away with it scot-free. I'm saying it right now. It's probably not the right thing to do. If you mess with my phone calls, there's going to be some problems. I'm just saying. You don't mess with my food either. You know, you don't mess with that stuff. And here's why. When you mess with people's visits, when you mess with their phone calls, their mail, their food, you cause riots. You get officers beat up. You get officers stabbed. You get officers chucked off the top run. That's how that stuff happens. That's how people get hurt. It's called creating a hostile work environment. They have rules against that in the internal management policies and procedures that govern the officers that work in the prison for that reason, because they don't want officers to get hurt. If there's a problem, we can go about it a different way, but don't mess with my food, don't mess with my visits, my phone calls, or my mail. There are measures put in place, avenues, channels to handle problems. There's a disciplinary procedure, there's grievances, there's narratives. You can call me to the captain's office, we can do whatever. You can write me up. But don't mess with that stuff. Don't mess with my connection to the outside world. Don't mess with the food that I'm putting in my body that I need to carry on with my day-to-day life. So there's that. Anyway, this has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. I will see you all later. Right.